all podcasts that exist without my knowledge exist without my consent. And that is what I would say where the judge as a podcaster. This is not just any book club, Cormac McCarthy month, where we read 2 of his most popular novels ever. Did I say the wrong name?
No, I was like,
okay,
Cormac
cool.
McCarthy. Woo.
I was like, whoa. Yes. So we read, Justin, my co-host, read The Road, and I read Blood Meridian.
Yeah. And last week we also, or 2 weeks ago, whenever we uploaded the episode, we also watched the movie No Country for Old Men. So we're getting our fair dose of Cormac McCarthy over here. And I've also read at least 55 to 60% of Blood Meridian, which is Pierce's book here. So let's just say that.
Probably around 60%, I would say, based off of the quotation that you gave me. That was like, I was surprised when I was on like page 200 something and it was there.
Yeah. There's a good reason why we quit. Or I quit, sorry. Pierce powered all the way through this. So
I wouldn't even call it powered. It was I didn't love reading it, but it was also like, it was pleasant. I was just reading
it was nice.
Yeah, it was fine. I wouldn't call it pleasant either based on the content, but it was a fine read.
This may be the most metal episode of Not Just Any Book Club so far, because a little bit of a content warning. Cormac McCarthy has a tendency to 1, not use quotation marks, 2, not use any commas or exclamation marks, and mostly a lot of his novels deal with graphic descriptions of violence and other crimes against humanity. So we'll try not to delve into that, but if you're even a little bit queasy, I mean, you should still listen to it, just to judge if you want to, because we need those listens. But, don't say we didn't warn you. Now you can't sue us. Yeah, but Cormac McCarthy, we don't know much about him. He's very reclusive. He seldom gives any interviews ever. Really, we barely know what the sound of his voice sounds like, except for one time he went on Oprah in 2006 to promote The Road. Other than that, we don't really know much about him. He works at the Santa Fe Institute, not as a literary professor, but as a contributor to science, because I know that he's really into science, which is awesome and good for him. More authors in STEM that can master both science and the arts. And really, that's all we really know about him. We know that he has a son, because that's what he wrote The Road for. Other than that,
Here's what I'll say. Here's what I will say about Cormac McCarthy, though, is a man who loves STEM and is involved in STEM and writes novels that are well regarded as probably amongst the greatest novels of all time somewhere. Is kind of like a modern
and it happens a little more frequently, but it's still kind of rare, because you can be both good art and science, because those two are not exclusive. But it's awesome if you're both good at the same time.
I was gonna say kind of it's almost like a modern philosopher who writes their philosophy books and then their novels, because I mean, I don't think science will ever entirely replace philosophy. Philosophy will always have a place. There's a saying where it's a philosopher, I forget what his name is, but he said something along the lines of scientists have a philosophy, they just haven't done the prerequisite thinking to know what it is. So that'll never replace that, but it has to some extent in terms of what we view as a search for knowledge. And so Cormac McCarthy is like a Albert Camus writing The Stranger, and also it's not a one-to-one comparison, but that's the comparison I would draw for a man of science being such a well-written author.
Yeah, we should do philosophy one day.
Oh, one day, maybe, perhaps.
No, don't discount that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of Cormac McCarthy's work, a lot of it is a thesis on philosophy. Not really a thesis, but his philosophy on the world is very apparent in all of his novels. I wouldn't say they variate from novel to novel. I think they're very consistent within his worldview. Which, what would you describe that as? I guess his philosophy.
It's like I would call Cormac McCarthy honestly like a realist. Like he's not really, and I hate to say it like that because obviously, you know, everyone thinks they're a realist, whether you're optimistic or pessimistic, but I just mean in terms of like he's very he's like cautiously pessimistic almost.
Mhm.
Like he believes that there is some hope in the world, or maybe cautiously optimistic, however you want to put it.
Optimistic
Um
nihilist.
I was trying to separate it from like
Mm.
cautiously optimistic because I think there is a difference between that and what he believes. He
Mhm.
basically seems to believe that like the world kind of sucks, but there is some hope left in it.
Mhm.
And we have to be able to get to that somehow.
Yes, because a lot of what people describe as like Cormac McCarthy, I think they focus a lot about the negatives, or really not really the negatives, the more hardcore aspects, the violence and all that permeate through the world.
Yeah, they focus on the pessimism that's definitely there, like in
Yeah,
much larger quantities than the hope part is,
yes,
honestly.
but consistently, at least throughout all the fiction that I've read of it, of his, is that there's always a one person at least that carries on the good with it. So it's not always pummeling down on the good guys. Um, Not to say that it's always happy, but like it's to qualify him as just like um, I really don't want to use the word nihilist, but like just like super pessimistic to the point of just like despair. It's not really accurate. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and I feel like if you closer analyze it, it just gets misconstrued as that. And I'm not saying that like maybe my interpretation of his philosophy is wrong, but I'm sure that if you've read more of his book, you'll see a common through line of just like good emerging out through the bad, or emerging in spite of the bad in the world.
Mhm.
Which, yeah, shall we discuss the literature? Unless you got more to say about Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, I will say also the sometimes the good, even if it is there, it sometimes does not win in the end of his stories. Um,
Oh, oh, the judge. Yeah,
maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, I will also say before we get into it, I do not actually mind as much spoiling these books because um I'm gonna tell you this straight up from the beginning. Like these are very in depth books. I feel like it would be like spoiling Moby Dick. It's like, oh god, you don't read Moby Dick for obviously the
the
ending is
plot.
important, but yeah,
Not a
you're not reading
mystery.
it right. Um, it's you're reading it because it's something you should read. It's something that would be good for you to read and good for you to think about. So I don't mind spoiling this as much, but spoiler possibly
We're
alert.
gonna
I don't know.
tastefully spoil it.
Tastefully spoil it. I don't know that we're gonna spoil it for sure or not, but I just
Um,
will put out that
okay.
forewarning.
And if you know the ending of these, okay, like I get what the concern is, but like I don't know, if you know the ending to Blood Meridian, it's not like, oh man, the entire story is spoiled for me, because Cormac McCarthy is not someone that predicates his entire stories on plots. Knowing the ending is kind of almost a foregone conclusion. Like you know the ending of the road going in, and I am pretty sure you kind of know that a lot of messed up stuff is about to happen in Blood Meridian. I don't know, I never got to the end of it. Um, yeah, I did read Blood Meridian. On one of my lesser favorite episodes. I won't tell you what episode it is. It's postmodernism. Don't watch it or don't listen to it, or at least in my opinion. Skip over my part. That's what I'm saying. But um, yeah, the road. Um, I didn't. Okay, so the road is about a man and a boy who live in this post-apocalyptic world that is ravaged by cannibals, and it's just the boy and the man surviving throughout this world. And I think that's really the simplified version of it. And it's kind of alluded to that the man's going to die of a disease that he does not want to pass on to his son. And this book has won so many awards. It has a movie out and everything, and I'm just kind of a bit miffed at the idea of this Cormac McCarthy the road being so acclaimed as it is. Um, from what research I've done on this, I mean the critics are more aligned, and if Goodreads is any metric to be measured by, it's a pretty polarizing book, and I unfortunately tend to fall into the latter camp where I do not like this book very much. I don't hate it as much as other people, but I mean I see some of its merits.
Justin
But
always has to be different when it comes to
okay,
like critically acclaimed modern books every time.
every time, every time. Um, it's just the pros, and I think we've kind of alluded to this in the beginning, where Cormac McCarthy he did not tend to use very he uses a lot of very long word not long words, but just very long sentences. The syntax is insane. He never uses any commas, or he seldom ever uses commas. And it seems very long and redundant. A series of unnecessary descriptions that just gratuitously complicates things. And he'll have a bunch of simple words and then punctuate it with a really long, complex word that almost seems like jargon that's not of this world. Not like in Lovecraftian sense, but like in a way that just like wanted to show off some fancy vocab. And I don't know what the point of it is in Blood Meridian, but I think in the Road, where all the purple prose is kind of stripped back and more simplistic, it's supposed to reflect the mundanity of just living in a post-apocalyptic world. Because a lot of this book is just the man and the boy just going through everyday life, avoiding, surviving, sometimes getting food, and um, it's supposed to reflect in the very purposefully restrained prose. It doesn't work. It's supposed to show the wariness. I got wary reading this. And I think one of the biggest or the weirdest idiosyncrasy of I think Cormac McCarthy is his tendency to not use contractions or or the apostrophe or use quotation marks, which there's that one infamous many infamous uses of the word don't, which is don't without the apostrophe. It's a non-word. Just use the apostrophe. In my opinion, I don't know. Um, it I get it. I get the point of it. It's just I don't. It's like watching a movie where the shots are just out of focus because it is distracting to the point where I don't really enjoy it.
See what I want to say about the writing style of Cormac McCarthy, at least in Blood Meridian, is that I feel like it's something that it can kind of, once you get used to it, it kind of gets out of the way of what's
Mm,
happening, and it's something that you can pay attention to, or it's something that you can choose to ignore to just get more of the like what's happening.
mhm.
To me, that's how I felt about it. Of course, the some of the like random, longer, more complex words where uh
Bit
they jump
jarring.
out at you.
Yeah.
Right, they jump out at you when they do happen, but like for the most part, once I got used to the and and
Meant to do that a lot.
yeah, it kind of fell away, and I mean, it was obviously wasn't a comma, but it wasn't that different from a comma unless I paid attention to it. To me,
Mm.
once you get used to it.
Yeah. For me, I couldn't get used to it. So checkmate there. Pierce. I don't know. It's just yeah, and I think his full commit. I mean, aside from the punctuation stuff, that's either take it or leave it thing. Fine, but I think it kind of damages the book because this entire book is predicated on the relationship between this man and the boy who is his son. Um, and it's just he's very committed to making sure that the dialogue is also reflective of his style, which is very sparse and not even reflective of just real people and how real people talk. Honestly, this feels like an imitation of a man being a kid, which is very not a compliment because it's not like the boy is more mature for his age. It's more like he cries and wails a lot, and they've been in this post-apocalyptic world for like 5 or 6 years, and I think the boy was just a very very small boy at the time. When all the stuff came down, they never explain what it is. So you would assume that he would just kind of get used to it because it's supposed to show how hardened he is. But whenever he sees a corpse, he screams. Whenever he sees something a little bit spooky that he should have gotten used to by now, he also just like starts wailing. And normally, I should not be criticizing how a kid would react in the post-apocalypse, but I think it takes me out of the immersion every single time because you know what's scarier than someone, a little kid screaming at a corpse that they see, like a little kid not screaming at the corpse that they see on the road that's being festered by vultures because he's seen it a million times before. This is a world manifested by cannibals, and it just doesn't work. And I mentioned the dialogue. It's just a lot of the dialogue is just very made of monosyllable, one syllable
Monosyllabic.
words. Is
Yeah.
that a word? Okay.
Monosyllabic words. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's just a lot of okay, do it, and so on. The dialogue's never used to build a relationship between the man and the boy. I think I have pulled up a quote here. This is one of the first lines of dialogue. I ask you something. Yes, of course. Are we going to die? Sometime. Not now. And we're still going to south. Yes. So we'll be warm. Yes. Okay. Okay. What? Nothing. Just okay. Go to sleep. Okay. Not really the kind of dialogue you want to be building up between a father who loves his son. And I I just don't. I don't really think this is the way that you should be doing dialogue. It should feel humanistic. Maybe the father tells the son a joke, or maybe the son, does something a little bit adorable and cheers him up. It's just these characters just feel very simplistic, and they seem like vehicles to explore the world, and they don't grow or change. The only thing that the boy has an effect on the man is to restrain him from doing anything evil, or not even like overly cruel. Like he'll go back and give him a man that he just robbed supplies. He'll spare a man, etc., etc. But it just stops being effective. And honestly, I hate to use the M word, but it becomes really melodramatic when it's just constantly just pummeling you with just all this grotesque imagery, all these these descriptions of this world that just it doesn't like paragraphs about like description, and it just doesn't work. um I will thank this book for one thing: The Last of Us.
Uh-huh.
Yes, it inspired it.
Yeah.
Very evident that it inspired it. um I'm a hardened man with a child that is supposed to teach him to be a better person, but like here, you don't really get it. I can compare The Last of Us to The Road, but I feel like we're going to be doing that when the show comes out, and I feel like we will maybe cover it? Question mark. But we will be discussing something along the likes. I just think The Last of Us kind of really just outshines it. And we're recording this before the show has come out, so maybe the show could even be better than the games. Who knows? Um, but yeah, I don't know. I do like the themes that it ruminates over about, like, what's the point of surviving in a world that is just so devoid of hope. It talks about the ethical survival and surviving ethically and surviving physically. How the boy, the man tells him, man tells the boy to always keep on carrying the fire, which is a phrase that carries over from No Country for Old Men. So, there's some continuity. I guess this is like a sequel to that in a very, very abstract way. And there's this one part of the book where I did find it really interesting how the man always carries a gun, but there's only one bullet, and it's implied that the bullet is intended for the boy because the man does not want to be living in the world without the boy. So he'd rather shoot the boy and kill him, and preserve his innocence rather than killing himself. So found that really interesting. And I guess there's some character development because they progressively learn to let go of the old world. The man just lets go of photos of his wife, and the boy lets go of their toys, and he loses his innocence in a way, but like his goodness remains, which is not enough to really develop these characters and do anything interesting. So
So I will just let everyone know, for those that follow us on Twitter, eventually I will get around to reading this book, and there will be at least one tweet about how Justin Pierce read it and he likes it, and it turns out Justin was wrong all along, but Pierce
Yeah.
couldn't say anything during the episode because he hadn't read the book before.
there will be an addendum to this episode, I'm sure, because I'm assuming that Pierce has really liked Blood Meridian. are really is at least intrigued by Cormac McCarthy's style.
Yep.
I feel like we'll be revisiting the road a little bit when we again cover The Last of Us, if we cover The Last of Us in a tweet maybe.
If. um, but yes, I mean, I don't really. Again, I don't really have anything to say except that I can't imagine it's that bad. I will also say the like I don't know. We did this over Old Man in the Sea as well, where Justin hated it, and I was like, "No,
Okay,
it
hate's
can't
a
be
strong
that
word
bad."
for that
He
one.
won a Pulitzer for it. Like obviously, it's gonna be at least very good, even if you don't think it's like the best thing ever written.
Mhm.
And I turns out I was correct. So we'll see about this one.
I've read The Old Man in the Sea at least 3 times, or at least twice ever since I first read it, and the Pierce lambasted me for my opinion.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
I think
you can go back and listen to our episode
that was a good episode.
Ernest Hemingway
I'll
if
let
you
you
want it
listen to
more
that
on
one.
that. But nonetheless, I don't really. Yeah, the one thing I guess I will say is that quote the thing you quoted, I actually don't think it was that bad. Like it was. I mean, it's one moment out of like 250 pages, but you're obviously using it as like a microcosm of a bigger issue. But even as a microcosm, if it's like that, like I think I get it as a um in its usage as for the meaning of the book from as I understand it.
Yeah, I don't know. It just felt like a really boring game of ping pong, just like words. Yeah,
I
I don't
just
know.
don't think you like simple writing, man. It's just no Hemingway, not the road. Isn't that, I just think
Maybe
simple writing might not be for you.
that might be it. I here's a
um.
possibly, but
Anyhow,
Blood
yep.
Meridian is something I've had experience with. So
Yes.
go
All
on
right.
with your criticisms.
So, Blood Meridian itself is basically a series of events. We're following the kid, I think he's an orphan from Tennessee, or he's a runaway, whatever his history before that point. He's definitely a runaway from Tennessee, and he ends up in Texas. And the first like really major thing that happens is he joins up with I don't know, I didn't know what it was called before, but it's called a filibuster group, who's headed into Mexico to continue the good fight against the heathen, uh not able to rule themselves Mexicans, so that way the US can have more land, even though the US isn't at war with Mexico. This is after, the Mexican American War, so it's done. That's done. But they're going anyways. And you know, uh they're arrested in Chihuahua. Or no, wait, first they get attacked by the Comanche. And as one of the survivors, he's arrested in Chihuahua, as a filibuster. And he has an acquaintance who he had met before called Toadvine, who's able to get him out of trouble by basically saying that they are, Indian fighters. They fight Indians for a living. And the town really needs a group of people like that. So they get joined up with another group, Glanton's group. And I just skimmed over like the first like a pretty decent sized chunk of the book, because the majority of the book and the majority of like what is talked about and discussed is his time with Glanton's group, because in that group is probably who will be eventually one of, I mean, he's already really well respected, but probably eventually will be one of the like most remembered and thought about characters in literature, Judge Holden, the judge.
Oh boy.
um so yeah, he meets up with Glanton's gang and Judge Holden and all of them, and they basically, the rest of the book is basically them up until towards the end is basically them going around. They get into like scuffles. They fight Comanche, Indians in general, I think, and then they kind of go around. They come back to Chihuahua, and then they're like praised as heroes who killed a bunch of Indians, and then they kind of take advantage of that. Eventually, after a few months of kind of like marauding over the area, just like killing who they please and sleeping where they want and drinking all the time, they head back into the U.S. And they set up this like operation by stealing this guy's like ferry. Not stealing, like he still lives on it and they pay him for it, but like he never give like express consent for them to run his like ferry business. He just kind of locks himself up, probably because he's scared of the group. They kind of team up with this native tribe in the region. I had the name here. The local Yuma, which is a Quechan tribe there. They kind of team up with them for like a fake attack on the ferry, and then they betray them. And so the Yuma eventually come back for revenge, and this is what kind of kicks off like the end game of the story, where Glanton's gang like falls apart pretty much. I mean, I could keep going until the end. Should I just keep going?
You know what? Blood Meridian spoilers from here on out.
Blood Meridian spoilers from here on out. So Glanton dies in the attack of the Yuma. He's caught off guard. But a few of the members get away, including the kid, obviously, who's our kind of like anti-protagonist. Tobin, which is an ex-priest in the gang. Toadvine gets away, and then the judge gets away, and it's called in the book The Idiot also gets away with the judge, who I don't think you actually, did you meet the Idiot? Did you?
No, I did not.
No, yeah. Very late addition to the group.
Wait, is he the one that they keep chained up, or like
Yes, yeah.
on a leash? I think. And
Okay.
then I was like, yeah.
But so the judge and the Idiot get away to the judge seems to take a liking to the Idiot while they're like doing their like ferry operation thing. And so they actually get away together, and they stick together for a while everyone's on the run from the Indians, the natives. And so they're all on the run. I think Tobin, the kid, and Toadvine eventually get together, and they're kind of like doing a stand, and then they see in the distance like the judge, who's like, I think he's naked if I'm remembering correctly, and the Idiot, they're like they're walking up. They've made it out. We didn't know whether they made it out to this point or not. And he starts like, I can't remember if it's right then or a little bit later in this like sequence, but he starts offering like money to people for things. Like I think he offers money to Toadvine for something. He offers money to the kid for his gun, and then he starts threatening them. And there's this whole like kind of standoff situation / on the run situation where now the kid and Tobin are running away from the judge. And Tobin is like telling him, you gotta shoot him. And there's this really great scene of Tobin and the kid, I think they're still together, sitting on like a hill or of some kind. I imagined it in my head as a sand dune, but I don't know that they were in the desert. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's how I imagined it. But they were on a hill, and there was kind of like this valley, and the judge like walks across it, and then it's like relief because he passes right by the kid, and Tobin is like, has been telling him to take the shot the whole time pretty much. But he walks past, and the kid doesn't have to stoop to that level to kill him, to the judge's level, and then the judge comes back.
Oh.
I think they are in the desert because he's worried about him seeing his like tracks in the sand. But the judge comes back and he just starts like monologuing. He's like, I know you're here, and I know that this priest has you like stooping to this level, but you've got like some good in you, and that's why we're at odds now, because you have this like good in you that I can't let continue, or so, I forget exactly what it was.
Gee.
Yeah, it's he's like, I know you're here, and then he just leaves. I'm pretty sure. Gosh, how does he get out of? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he just leaves. I should have really like, if I was going to talk this in depth, I should have gone and maybe not reread it, but at least skimmed. But yeah, he gets away and he gets to San Diego, and I think the kid tries to shoot Holden at some point but misses. But the kid gets to San Diego, he gets separated from Tobin. The kid's imprisoned. The judge visits him in jail, and he says that he told the jailers the truth about how he was like the ringleader of Glanton's gang. But the kid eventually is released, and he's doctor treats his wound, and then we do a time skip where the kid is now referred to as the man. And he's like old now. He's like middle-aged. Yeah, well,
He has his
older.
cane ready.
He's not the kid anymore. And there's some really cool and interesting scenes with, I guess, the man during this like last chapter or two. But he eventually comes into Fort Griffin. Yes. He makes his way back to Texas. And at a saloon, he sees the judge, and he's like trying, I think, not to get noticed. Like he's just and eventually the judge comes over, and he strikes up a conversation about how the kid has arrived at the saloon for the dance that the judge refers to and praises. And the kid seems to get like frustrated with him, like that the judge is here. By the way, the judge has not appeared to age at all in like
ageless.
20 or 30 years. Probably 30 years, I believe. And the kid points to a dancing bear in the saloon, and he says, even a big dumb animal can dance. And he goes out to the outhouse. The judge is there, apparently, and then some people open the outhouse later, and we don't see what happened, but they just say, good God Almighty, or one of them does. And then the final paragraph is the judge in the saloon dancing. He's playing a fiddle. Ooh, I wonder what that could be a reference to. And he's saying that he will never die. He'll never die. And then there's an epilogue, which I don't really understand. I read about it a little bit. It's a man is arguing lines of holes across the prairie for a fence, perhaps. He sparks a fire in each of these holes, and an assortment of wanderers trail behind him. I'm very confused about what that means. I just read that from Wikipedia because I have no idea what I couldn't get that from actually reading the epilogue. The epilogue is very confusing to me. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed the book. I think the judge is clearly an embodiment of evil of some kind.
Yes.
I don't think he's literally the devil, but McCarthy is invoking the devil to, make it an obvious embodiment of evil. Not to mention, obviously, McCarthy's own. He seems to be Christian of some kind, or maybe not Christian, but influenced by Christianity
Paradise
in his
Lost is one of his
philosophy.
biggest influences.
Right. So
I've
he,
not read it. Sorry.
yeah, I guess we don't literally know if he's Christian or not, but we know for sure that Christianity is a influence on him
Yeah.
of some kind. And so I think he's just invoking the devil here, and the judge is supposed. It's not necessarily supposed to be. Um, I feel like the invocations of Christianity are there for sure. However, I think that it's more universal than that, obviously. Um, and one thing that I had always felt throughout the entirety of the book was that um there were these moments of like great beauty, even in like moment to
Yeah.
moment we were always seeing how tough and hard it was, not only in travel but obviously in all of the super violent altercations. Tough to even read some of the things that happen for some
Very
people.
graphic. Yeah.
Yeah, very graphic. But I always felt like there were these weird, kind of weird, but also very intriguing moments of like of beauty
Hmm.
in their travels. And I actually also have something that I want to read out of my book.
Holy cow.
This is during one of the chapter 12, which if I remember correctly, there was a lot of travel in this chapter, at least in the beginning part of it. Let me read one paragraph here. That night they were visited with a plague of hail out of a faultless sky, and the horses shied and moaned, and the men dismounted and sat upon the ground with their saddles over their heads, while the hail leaped in the sand like small lucent eggs concocted alchemically out of the desert darkness. When they resaddled and rode on, they went for miles through cobbled ice, while a polar moon rose like a blind cat's eye up over the rim of the world. In the night they passed the lights of a village on the plain, but they did not alter from their course. Um, and I will say in that is certainly a usage of McCarthy's, I guess, kind of iconic at this point style, that I thought was very beautiful and intriguing in the way that it was written. The fact that it doesn't give you a breath, the not only the experience of being in hail, but also the beauty that's come from this specific hailstorm is breathtaking. Um, in a way that when you read it, like you are literally just it keeps going and going and going and barely gives you room to pause. I had to pause to breathe in a moment where there was no punctuation because I was trying to kind of embody that and not like breathe in between words and stuff like that. But this is one of a few moments where it really stuck out to me. This moment of like of beauty in. I mean, some people think that the landscape in Blood Meridian is supposed to be an embodiment of hell. Like that's how rough it is. Um, but I always felt like there were these moments of not righteousness, but these beautiful moments just sprinkled throughout. And before this episode, I read up on some interpretations. By the way, apparently this is the most uninterpretable book, or one of the most uninterpretable books ever. People going so far as to say it evades interpretation. But nonetheless, another interpretation that I saw was something called theodicy. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I had to look up the definition for that. But the definition here is the vindication of divine goodness and providence in view of the existence of evil. So even through the violence and the horrific moments and the hard travels and the horrific landscape, which again some people have thought is supposed to represent hell, like literally the worst possible place you could be in. Through all of that, there are these beautiful moments of goodness that still exist, and beauty for the reader to enjoy, while in other parts they are being horrified and, depending on the person, possibly having trouble getting through it. Which I thought was really interesting that I was able to pick up on that without really having the words to describe what was happening.
Thing.
Yeah. Uh, I'm definitely intrigued by Cormac McCarthy for sure. But yeah,
What
and
do you
then
think the
obviously, mhm.
point of all that violence of Blood Meridian was? Just like because the reason why I dropped it, and I kind of retract the statement of saying it's the worst book I've ever read. Still not a very pleasant read, and I
Mhm.
still look okay. So I read The Road again, knowing reading a bunch of analyses on Blood Meridian, going, oh, I guess I missed something. Maybe if I read The Road with the right mindset, knowing his style, and I actually did like No Country for Old Men, but that's kind of a different story. For some reason, I just like that book, and that's like the one exception. I really did enjoy that book, but it's like if I go into The Road, knowing his
Mhm.
style, knowing his philosophy, knowing that not to focus on the plot, maybe I will enjoy The Road more, and maybe I might gain some new appreciation for Blood Meridian, which I did because I know like a lot of it is laden with so many literary allusions and maybe some biblical allusions as well. Definitely true. It just, I still don't know what the point of all that violence was in Blood Meridian. It makes me feel like it's just violence for the sake of violence. It's gratuitous, really.
Well, I think the point is to set up this terrible, horrific, landscape, and to have the existence of literal evil kind of thrown in your face over and over and over again, just so that those moments of good kind of really shine through. And I know there was something that you said while I was reading it that you, I guess, had probably heard from somewhere else, or it might have been your interpretation. I don't know. That often the kid is left out of the descriptions of violence because it's supposed to be up to interpretation whether or not he's involved, how involved he is, at least.
Mhm.
Um, and I think by my interpretation, I don't know how involved he is. I think like clearly from the altercation with the judge later, he's probably not as involved as the judge wanted him to be. And I think that's also another point with it is we have this character who we're supposed to be following, who seemingly, according to my interpretation and according to the thing that the judge says during their standoff, has good in him despite his rough past, how far away from home he
Hmm.
is, and the people that he's running with. He has some good in him that the judge himself sees. Um, and so I think like basically what I'm getting at is I think the violence is there specifically to throw that in your face, and then the kid, and it's also kind of to help with that interpretation that I just, or the thing that I just said about the kid, where he's left out, you don't know, and then it's clear, in hindsight, once the judge starts talking about
Mhm.
the kid and his morals and his values, that maybe the kid, even if he is involved and he's doing horrific things, maybe it's not as horrific as, maybe he's not doing the most horrific things that we're reading.
So I really had to get to the ending to really get to the point of all
Yeah,
that.
pretty much. The good is and the good also, like I said, I think is throughout the book, but it is well hidden. That paragraph that I read is in the middle of a very hard travel across the desert. And
Mhm.
even within that paragraph, they're talking about how harsh the hail is for the horses and the people riding on the trail.
That is a very valid point. I don't know how much I really want to read that again. Just like it was brutal.
Hmm.
And usually for some reason I could take descriptions of violence, but apparently not against animals, and apparently not against cats because I don't know. There was that one book that I read. this is a tangent, but
Yeah.
the sailor who fell from grace into the sea. I immediately just stopped reading it after there's this one kid that brutalized a cat. I'm like, I don't want to do this, but for some reason, I'm guessing this was the intention with Blood Meridian. Also, by the way, the joke there is because I'm allergic to cats. I forgot to tell you guys that.
Yeah.
That was important context to the punchline. Um, with Blood Meridian, it's just like the first very graphic scene happened. I forgot what that was, but it kind of numbs you to the I don't want to say novelty, but the eviscerating feeling of ooh, didn't deserve that. That shouldn't have happened. Oh, poor man who got his skull ripped off or whatever. I I don't know. It feels numbing, and I know that's supposed to paint like you're supposed to get to the east of the world, but there comes a point where I'm just like I don't want to read all this.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but it's also like, hmm.
It,
Um,
I guess it's like a greater disagree or like preferences. I don't know.
yeah, and it's also, I think you just kind of have to like stick with it and kind of accept, not let yourself go totally numb, or recognize that you are going numb, and kind of
Hmm.
recognize what your feelings would be if you weren't numb to it by
I was
now.
just like wondering what the point of all of it.
Hmm.
I mean, because you kind of justified it. It's all quote unquote justified at the end. It's just
Hmm.
like numb to
I
the
mean,
point where I'm like,
that is the point of a lot of classics. A lot of
yeah,
classics justify the things that they
violence.
do in the
Yeah,
ending. Like,
yeah,
I, I mean, a lot of anything with a lot of depth usually
yeah.
justifies choices that it made by
It
its
was just
ending.
very hard to move on because it was just like it was so caught up in the fact that it was just describing all these facts of violence, which were
Hmm.
effective for the most part until the point where I'm kind of like, all right, you can wrap this up here. I've gotten the feeling already, and now it's overstated its welcome.
I also think like there's a fairly consistent stepping up of it.
Mm.
The constant like mistreatment of animals kind of got to me, which I know there's obviously more horrific things
Happened to people.
in that
Yeah.
happen to people than some of the things that happen to animals. But even from the very beginning, how the boy treats his, or how the kid rather treats his donkey in the first few chapters before he gets rid of it, uh, kind of got to me a little bit just straight from the outset, and not even really that much violent had happened up to that point.
Hmm.
He sells the donkey when he joins up with the fake army, so this is before he's even with the people who are going to commit the most violence. Um, and I'm already like kind of feeling weird about it, but however, I think pointing out the animal cruelty, I have to point out a scene where the judge, he's in town, they're in a town, I forget what town it is, maybe it's Chihuahua, I don't remember, but he's walking along, the gang's like hanging out, and a kid walks up to the judge with a few puppies, and the judge, he pays for two puppies, he takes them, he does a little coin trick behind the kid's ear, like kind of
Hmm.
like, oh, affable, like funny, haha.
Hmm.
And then he takes the puppies from them by the scruffs of their necks and walks onto a bridge and tosses them into a river. Um, there there is a stepping up throughout the book that, while it doesn't necessarily keep you from getting numb, it's that scene specifically was shocking to me because, I mean, puppies and babies are about the most innocent beings that you can like have. A baby anything, a baby animal, a baby human, and
Hmm.
obviously it kind of showed the judge's lack of respect for innocence in any capacity. Um, but and there are definitely other things that are worse that kind of show his lack of respect for innocence. Like I believe when the Indians attack, he has like a 10-year-old girl in his room.
Oh.
So yeah, so it's throughout it, there's a consistent stepping up from baby animals to a child. Um a 10-year-old, because the child comes after the puppy scene.
Hmm.
um so that like that again, I just realized this as I'm saying it. There's a consistent stepping up of all of the violence and horrific
It's like
things.
slowly increasing the heat while you're
Right.
in a pot of water.
And so it while yes, you probably will stay at somewhat numb, it's it keeps going up. You can't constantly
How is he
adjust
gonna
your
top
numbness
this? Oh, he
before
did.
right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I don't know. It's a really excellent book, I think. Even if
mm,
I'm positive I got maybe like 15% of what it is possible to get out of it.
that is. I mean, if there's one, yeah, because I don't know. I know that reading Moby Dick and Paradise Lost is also not like it's recommended to really understand what's underneath the surface and the subtext of it. Um, I haven't done that. Have you done that? I don't think so. Have
No.
you? No.
I
Maybe
I
one
mean
day.
like
We plan on it.
I want to read the books that are behind these kinds of books.
Yeah.
The Moby Dicks, the Paradise
Yeah.
Lost,
I get
the
really
all
interested in
those, but
all that.
I
I
have not yet. So
Yet is the key word here. I also do want to mention the judge is a really interesting character, even though he's the embodiment of evil. I just like, I mean, like is not like endorsing his ideas. Like I just
he's
like,
intriguing. He captures the imagination.
yeah, I like a really despicable villain. One without nuance. Just like just the pure embodiment of evil that we're supposed to hate. Here, you kind of fear him because like you don't know what he's gonna do. He can predict the future in a way. Like there was that one monologue where it's like, "Yo," he didn't go "yo," but like the war, like how he predicts like how later wars will be fought with machines and all that, which is
Mm-hmm.
very eerie. Um, and
Yep.
there are no redeemable traits. Every time he teases you, like with the puppy thing, with the coin behind the ear, he teases goodness and then just throws it out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just very concerned for Cormac McCarthy how he can think of something so despicable. Just like
Then there's always the famous scene where he's like anything that exists in creation without my knowledge exists without my consent.
spooky.
And then he goes on to say something along the lines of like, I would prefer that birds live in cages because their flight is an insult to me.
Holy cow!
And one of the gang members is like, that'd be a really funny zoo. Like, yeah. And he just chuckles. Like the judges, he like smiles or something. It's that scene is famous for a reason.
Yes.
It's very, very intriguing. Uh, a a person being so evil captures the imagination very well. There's a reason why we study. I guess I won't say his name because I think we all know who I'm talking about. One of the most evil men in the history of
Oh.
humankind. There's a reason
Yeah.
why almost if you walk into a bookstore and you go to the German history section, almost every book is about him or like the effects of him.
Wow,
Yeah.
what a time to mention Germany, huh? Because
Oh my
next
god.
month, next month.
Are we
That's
wrapping
not.
up? Are we
Uh,
wrapping up on that note?
we are wrapping up
All right.
because
Fair enough.
that's
I feel like I said what I had to say about Blood Meridian.
it was very dense.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is the tip of the iceberg because what I read from it, I had trouble understanding it. Pierce kind of illuminated the possibility of me coming back and visiting this book. Probably not really. But hey, if someone recommended, hey, what's the most hardcore Western that you've read? I'll be like, I recommend Blood Meridian to you and just see how they like it. Is this a red flag book? Maybe. But
It depends, I would say,
okay,
but that's
red.
with anything actually. Red
Yeah,
flag books, it depends on who you're talking
it's how
about.
they interpret it because
Yeah.
obviously the author is not endorsing these ideas. I think Cormac McCarthy probably is a good guy in real life. I don't know. Probably he doesn't do interviews. We don't know.
Yeah, it's probably a decent person, and he's clear. I think it's very clear he's not endorsing the judge as like a person to follow or be. Very, very obvious, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyhow, it again, it is funny that I mentioned Germany because we will announce right now. We might have already announced it and I just forgot. But next month will be German literature. If you're interested, I will be discussing Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, Hermann Hesse's most popular book.
I will also
And
be reading that, and I will also be reading Perfume by something Suska and I don't know how to
Patrick
Patrick
Suskind.
Suska. So that episode, spoiler alert, is that Pierce is going to correct me a lot on a lot of pronunciation.
Well, so but I will also say I might be reading something else. I don't know. We have a lot of time. Like we've been kind of reading ahead, so I
Yeah.
mean there might even be another book in there. Who knows?
Yeah. But and also if you want to join us for the movie or the bookends, the show not about books that should have been called Off the Books, but we are too lazy to change the name now. We'll be talking about my favorite director, Fritz Lang, and his other masterpiece, the movie M, 1931. I love this movie, and I would usually say Pierce should watch a German silent film, but I don't know if he's really up to that task because German silent film is very influential, Tim Burton. But Fritz Lang's first sound film in Germany, I think maybe his last M. So be on the lookout for that.
But if you want information on that show, that future show, this show, as well as our other podcast plus show, Not Just Any RPG, where we play tabletop RPGs, you can find all that information on Twitter at Not Just Any Pod. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, give us a like, give us a rating, follow us, whatever it is on whatever platform. We'd really appreciate it. And
here we go. I don't know how to say Auf Wiedersehen, Prometheus.
You didn't save that for German month? Auf Wiedersehen?
I should have, but now it's too late for that, so I'll think of another one. Let's hope we don't do it in Italian.